All right. So, guys, we are live and really excited to deep dive a little bit into a conversation right now that I feel has become ever increasingly louder, o- particularly over, say, in the last year and a half or so. But I think it's always kind of been there, and I think it's found sort of um, a new energy, a new drive in terms of why this conversation, particularly, is really mattering. We're living in a time right now where just with the advent of social media now, it's become very easy to weaponize racism or particular language or rhetoric and against people. But before we go into all of that, Manoj, it's good to see you here. And yeah, what are your thoughts on today's topic?
Well, good to see you, and good to have Journal with us, right, as well. So yeah, first of all, welcome to everyone on our joint Facebook Live. I think it's a topic that we wanted to kind of talk about for some time, but we didn't want to react to it. Is probably the best way to do it. So we let the kind of media storm or the specific catalyst of this topic die down, which we can go deep into. I think, and what I'm referring to is obviously the football and England's exit, or should I say, amazing journey that they got that far, depending on your perspective. And I guess that's a good place to start, right? So, in terms of what our perspective is, we'll always perceive whether we deem ourselves to maybe define if we are racist or not racist. And I think the word racist is a really powerful word, but a misunderstood word, because actually it's a doctrine that we all belong to. And what do I mean by that is that the day that all the governments across the world decided to separate race by definition and box, that you had to tick a box when you cross a border from one country to another, whether you accept it or not, you're actually subconsciously, unknowingly, or knowingly contributing towards the, I guess, the echo chamber that it always will be there. And it's just recognizing certain behaviors and how we behave towards it, because it's a spectrum. It's not binary. Well, certainly from my own perspective, I think being racially aware, or the word racism, is a spectrum, just like any other ism, whether it's sexualism, ageism, etc. So I think we've got far too many isms out there. Don't get me on that. It sounds like a Bob Marley track. You're going to get me started now. But I think my own perspective is, growing up, to be completely brutally honest with you, I probably was subjected to conscious biases, and then unknowingly there was some racial bias in me as a young kid, but I wasn't aware of it, if I have to be completely brutally honest. And then as I grew older and I grew more sort of aware of it, and then went to a school where there were people from all faiths and all backgrounds, you become friends, because as a child, the beautiful thing about being a child is, right, at early age of a child, you don't know anything different. It's a boy or a girl. You want to play together, kick a football around, or play cricket, or jump on a bike. It's friendship, right? It's only when you get older the divide starts to actually really get deeper, and the stereotypes, the racial dogmas, the divides, the subtle under the surface racism that exists as well, right? That's almost as dangerous, right? Where I'm your best friend, but actually I say things that actually bring your character down, and actually almost throwing a dagger at your whole kind of race, right? But subtly doing it, and whether that's I was actually watching a TEDx talk on the way here. I thought, let me kind of get in the zone of what we're talking about. I forget the guy's name. It was like over 9 years ago, and it was a black guy mentioning the fact that how he had to actually break the word racist to his 8-year-old daughter when his daughter heard the N-word for the very first time, right? Which is it's a pretty deep thing as a father, and especially as a black father hearing that. It's no different from somebody saying something racist to a brown person or a white person, right? It's the same impact. It's actually the same impact. But subjective to what you've gone through, you might perceive it to be different, right? So I think it's it's a powerful subject. It will never go away, unfortunately, because we're all divided, whether we like it or not. We're all been put in groups and boxes and etc. But I think we have a power to do something positive to change the narrative of how we perceive it. And I think I'll stop there.
No, thanks for that, Manoj. Like again, some definitely some big points that we're going to tuck into as well. Jinal, in terms of from your own experience or your own perspective, why is this particular conversation, say in the last few months, given that there's been a few high-profile instances aside, it feels like it's taken more prominence now in a lot of conversations in the mainstream, offline, online. What's your perspective on that?
Well, actually, Manoj, as you were just talking, I was just thinking about everything that happened during the pandemic last year, Black Lives Matter and all of that. And yes, it's great. We're talking about this and it is a loud and conversation and there's all these kind of conversations and things happening, but it's also quite frustrating that it took something like the George Floyd situation to bring us to this point. That should have never happened and we shouldn't be here as a result of that. But anyway, that happened, and I definitely kind of echo your point, Manoj, of, there was a lot of stuff that happened last year as a result of the whole George Floyd thing. But I kind of sometimes feel when things like this happen, whether it's to do with racism or anything that's happening in other countries, in our own country, it's sort of loud for a while and everyone kind of gets in the bandwagon and then it kind of stops. So I think this is quite an important time that we're having this discussion because, yeah, it's like more than a year later, but I don't think that time period sort of matters. As you were saying, Manoj, we're going to be having these conversations in 20 years time, 30 years, 40, 50, when our kids have, grandchildren. I think it's just a responsibility for the next generation, for our generation, to kind of, as you were saying, change that narrative. I'm trying to do that with family, for example, grandparents, parents. Yes, they have these sort of certain fixed views about certain community groups, certain groups of people. And I know it's not intentional, but that's also not an excuse to say certain things. And I feel it's our duty and our responsibility, not coming from an egotistical sort of point of view, but because we have a different education, a different understanding, it's our duty to educate them and make them aware. Actually, it's not okay to say this, and this is why it's not okay. But also trying to understand where they're coming from with whatever they've said. There might be a reason why they've said that. And so it's trying to understand where they're coming from as well. It's a two-way conversation. And they've been really, really interesting conversations. I don't think I've had any conversation with a family member where I've kind of raised something, where someone has said something and I've said it's not okay. It's actually always been a really positive conversation. And I think that's only been that way because I've taken the time to listen to where they're coming from. It's not about me being right. I'm not right. We're just having a discussion and I'm trying to understand where their point of view has come from. Likewise with me as well. So yeah,
I think
it's interesting.
Because this conversation can't move forward if there's righteousness on both sides of you can't say this, you can't say that.
Yeah.
That's where it falls flat. There needs to be a discourse in order for there to be any kind of forward shift. And I mean, racism in itself, if you think about it, it's a learned behavior. Like we weren't born with it. We just inherited it from someone else's experience or something that someone said that began to frame a narrative of how a certain group of people occur for us, a certain caste will occur for us in in the South Asian dynamic, or even within caste, if someone's more fair-skinned or dark-skinned, there's that element of discrimination that comes into play as well. And Charmy has a point here as well in the chat that bringing awareness to people like we do with inclusion and diversity, for example, will change mindsets. But I also feel that sometimes ramming down inclusion and diversity down people's throats can also be counterproductive because you're kind of doing it for the sake of. So there has to be a middle ground where people are just seen as they are. And how do you equalize opportunities versus giving people, because this is, I suppose, I've heard this term reverse racism, where you're creating excessive, not excessive, but you're giving people certain opportunities ahead as well. So I know that's a bit of a gray area in itself, but we can see that there's definitely a middle ground that everyone can come to in order to just equalize the opportunities that there are. And also, and if we go back to the more recent example here was, we saw how the England football team were being booed for taking the knee, and despite them saying it's not a political statement, it's a gesture to highlight racial inequality. It's fascinating how players taking a stance for equality across the board were being booed because there's a narrative in politics that it's gesture politics, it's a political thing as well. So it's really interesting how sometimes actually just people aren't accepting why people are doing a certain gesture or taking a certain stance or something visual as well. So on that point, I know there's quite a few things there. We talk about the conversation of being an ally. So, Jinal, what is being an ally in this conversation? What does that mean?
I think firstly, for me personally, and like Manoj, I think you mentioned it. Don't get me wrong, I've been racist myself, but unconsciously it's something I've learned through parents and not realizing, oh, that's not okay to say this about this group of people. But then it's my responsibility to kind of go out there and relearn something. Like, okay, it's not okay. So someone's told me it's not okay to say this. Why isn't it okay to say this? I would say an ally is that, you first start off with kind of understanding what these other groups go through, for example. So like when all the Black Lives Matter stuff happened, I wasn't aware how bad, certain groups do face racism and why they face racism. And before I kind of jumped on the whole bandwagon with posting loads of stuff on social media, I was like, well, hang on, I'm a bit of a hypocrite if I start posting stuff, supporting like the Black community when I don't even know enough myself. So let me kind of go and research stuff and talk to friends. I have Black friends and I've never even had these conversations with them before, not in depth anyway. So start those conversations, start sort of understanding what other people go through. It might not mean that, I don't know, overnight you're going to be sort of anti-racist, but it's at least trying to understand, listen, and take that time to speak to people. Really take that time to listen to how they feel and where they're coming from. You might not agree with certain things. I've had conversations like that, but we're having, mature, open, transparent conversations, and that's led to something really important. So I would say that's the first step for me personally in terms of what it means to be an ally.
And what was something that you learned that really surprised you?
So this is how present I'm not in certain situations, and now that it's got me to be more present when I'm around people. So one of my friends was telling me, we were like, I don't know, we must have been 16, 17, met her in college, and we'd gone out for dinner. We went, no, not dinner, sorry, afternoon tea. We got like a present for sort of passing our A levels, and the present was an afternoon tea at the Ritz. And we both went there. We were both sort of dressed up, and we got there. And I do remember the situation, but it didn't click why staff there were behaving the way they were. So we got inside, we booked, the guy asked us, okay, so, what's your name? Have you got a booking? I said, yes. I was there early. They seated me down. My friend came afterwards, and as soon as she sort of came in, sat down on the table, one staff member had come and just started being a bit difficult with us. So, we can't see the booking on the table. And there was this whole thing about the reservation. I was like, but one of your staff colleagues has just taken the reservation. I saw the name on my list. So the reservation was under my friend's name. So there was a whole sort of confusion with that. And then I didn't realize, but she clearly felt this. A lot of the people who were in that room, so there was a special room for the afternoon tea, just kept staring at both of us. They kept staring at both of us, and there was a table next to us, and there was a couple, and the wife actually said to the husband, again, I wasn't present to this conversation, I didn't even hear it, but my friend did, and she had actually said to her husband, "Oh my God, I can't believe they've let that black girl in." And my friend didn't even say anything to me until I had this conversation with her a few months ago. I was like, "Are you serious?" And apparently that's happened a few times where I've gone out with them to restaurants, to certain places, and she has been stared at, comments have been made. I've just not been present that these comments have been about her, and it's been about her race. So that was really, really powerful for me, because I was like, wow, I'm clearly just not a very present person. And that opened up a lot of conversations between us two, because I didn't even know she really experienced these things, and that kind of, I felt really bad as a friend, actually. But I learned a lot through those conversations.
I mean, that, yeah, imagine, you can't even begin to imagine what it's like to kind of almost have to live like that all the time, knowing that you're always almost going to be judged before you've even said anything, and you just walk into a room. And I know there's, you know, there's certain dynamics even for us as South Asians as well, but just there's so many different layers and levels and nuances based on that as well. Manoj, what are your thoughts?
Well, there's a lot of what you touched on actually before, and what General touched on. I guess I just want to unpack that a little bit more deeper, and then I'll share my thoughts on this. So I think General, you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think the first thing, if you look at the spectrum and range of racism, very first beginning 2 or 3, if you were to sort of dissect them, it's denial, right? It's denial and it's ignorance. So I think what General said is really, really true. So I think first, meet them where they are. There must be a reason why they're sharing whatever thoughts they're sharing. There's no point having a screaming contest with someone. You're never going to change people's opinions or win their hearts that way. I think understand that. Was it systemically programmed in them? Was it societally, subjected to that because of the environment? Was it parental upbringing, or was it a micro decisions, 1,000 micro decisions that led to who they are right now, right, based on whatever experience they've lived? And so I think that's definitely the first place to meet them at, because you're not there to necessarily change them. And I think being an ally to racism is having an immense amount of self-awareness. I think that's absolutely key. Otherwise, if you don't have self-awareness, the opposite of that is ignorant. And if you're ignorant, you're on the spectrum of racism, because you're part of the problem, and you either part of the solution or you're part of the problem, right? And that saying is so true. It's either you don't necessarily have to do anything, or like the civil acts movement or anything like that, or civil rights movement, sorry. But having awareness and having discussions like General is doing with your circle of influence, whether that's your friends, your family, and your colleagues, you're going to filter these conversations out, and then you're going to surface people's thought patterns, and then you're going to realize either our own ignorance or people's ignorance around us. And I think that's really powerful exercise to do. I think I would challenge everyone to do that, because I guarantee not everybody will agree with you, me included, by the way, people who know me. It's just an fascinating subject to talk about, right? Because you're different based on your upbringing. I'm different based on my upbringing. We're just all, me and General just touched on that. We didn't, like you touched on it, right, Viraj? It's nature versus nurture. It's impossible to be born a racist. Absolutely statistically impossible to be born a racist, right? You become aware of segregation and different colors and different groups, and then thoughts and remarks, whether that's strong remarks or hateful remarks, or whether it's subtle, and that gets programmed in you. Then it's a choice. So it's such a deep subject. We can go so many. So it's like What? Who is it who put the comment up again? Can you?
Which comment from?
One you read? You only read one
One that
comment.
you read out.
Yeah, from Shami. Bringing awareness to people like we do with inclusiveness and diversity, for example, will change mindsets. And then she's added, the bottom line I feel is that if people truly want to change, they will.
Yeah, so let's take the first part of that comment. So thank you, Shami, for contributing and bringing your time and energy to this conversation. Much appreciated. So the first thing, I work with a company called MSD UK, right? And their whole premise and essence is ethnic minority businesses and the promotion of it, and to break down the stigma of large corporates like, I won't name any because it would put me on either side, and I'm not taking any sides, but and the interesting topic that always comes at our meetings is, are we a BAME group or are we an ethnic minority group, right? Because both have different connotations. It's just fascinating, right? But I think the essence of what Shami said, yes, bringing the awareness of that is absolutely a great starting point. But a lot of corporates, unfortunately, not a lot, I don't want to sort of punish everyone the same brush, but the select corporates are doing a tick box exercise from a CSR perspective to say, yeah, we're diversity inclusion because I've hired 2% more than
Yeah.
0%.
Oh, that's so annoying.
I know. So, but applause to anyone who started on the journey, even if your intention is not pure, because actually you've broken a ceiling. So I guess I like to be on the positive side of things in life generally. So, applause to anyone who's done something, albeit your intention might be shallow and it might be commercially related or brand related. That's fair enough. But we need to constantly talk about it, and there will be an echo chamber for decades, unfortunately, that we're talking about this, because it's a topic that will never go away. It just won't go away because.
So is this more of a conversation of equality or equity? Because equality is, let's say you're trying to look over a wall, people are tall or people are short and they have the same height of a viewing platform. That's equity. But if the intention is to get everyone to be able to see the view over the fence, then there's got to be different levels to give everyone that same view. Because you're right, there is a conversation of, okay, well, we can tick the CSR box and have a quote unquote diverse workforce, but then I'm thinking of a few organizations that I know. If you look at where, let's say, the sort of frontline workers are, or sort of the more sort of menial, sort of lower middle management, it's predominantly people that are of ethnic minorities, but the decision makers at the very top represent a certain demographic as well. So there's levels and nuances of there. So let's say if you're a business owner, is this more of a conversation about equality or equity?
But see, that's such a fascinating question, and it really depends on your intention, right? It can be a conversation about. It can be a conversation about both. What was that? You've just triggered a thought in my mind, right? And I did something retrospectively that could be pretty stupid, but I'll share it. But I did it. I wouldn't change it anyway, because it was it was a social experiment. What was that? Does anybody remember? God, I'm not gonna remember now. But there was some. What was it? It was like a famous shooting, and then everywhere in central London, every one of the Met Police and were armed, right? There was an incident. I can't remember what it was. It was a good few years back, but everyone was literally armed to the teeth, right? There was something that happened, and then I got a producer. So a producer, for anyone who doesn't know, I've got several. It's basically when a policeman stops you, and then they don't arrest you, but they have a conversation with you, and they make you tick a box. Which ethnic minority do you belong to? So I thought, let's do something different, because let's test this. And I shouldn't. I mean, retrospectively, I was nearly late for a meeting, but but I thought let's do something. So I ticked Muslim. Right, I just ticked Muslim because I wanted to know what would they react, how would they react, not knowing me, just because I ticked a box. Right, I'm still the same person. Right, my belief system is still the same, and I got grilled. And I'm like, listen, mate, you could grill me as long as you want, but I need you to, I actually demanded a producer because I need evidence to my manager. I got stopped at a police station for, I think, what felt like an eternity, but it was only probably about 11, 12 minutes. But I was smiling inside because I wasn't accidentally subjected to racism. I was part of a social experiment that I started to see what would happen. And I promise you, it's mind-boggling now that because of a box I ticked, I was subjected to that 11 or 12 minutes of grilling. But then I can't judge him in one light because from a security perspective, I might have raised his awareness for what, rightly or wrongly. And then I could argue that if he stopped a terrorist act, and I was a terrorist, right, God forbid, then he saved a lot of lives around me. So you could look at it in any angle you want to, right? It's just, and I couldn't, and at that moment I did judge, I'm not going to lie, but right now I don't judge that act because I don't know, did he do it from an intention of protection and awareness because of what happened? And I don't know what happened, but something really happened. I'll try and remember as the conversation goes. So it's just fascinating that me ticking a box literally led to a bombardment of extra questions and or due diligence on his part that would not have led to it had I ticked the box that I would normally have ticked, right, which is of Indian origin. It's just fascinating. It's just fascinating.
I've had a similar experience. I mean, not that I was doing a social experiment, but every time I go to the States and you go through no, not customs. What are they called? Security or whatever before you go and get your luggage. Yeah. No. Is it that? Yeah, it is passport control. So my surname, Amin, I'm Indian, but Amin is also a Muslim forename.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people have always assumed I'm Muslim and completely get interrogated. But then I have an Indian friend who comes, or Indian cousins with a different surname, nothing, always just me when I'm with a group of friends because of my surname. And one guy actually did tell me that, oh, I thought you were Muslim, right? And that's got to do with what? Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. A few friends of mine that are Sikh, turban beard, have had the full scan, everything. Like, not even a question. It's like you go in that line instead, and it's totally mad. But I suppose at the same time, this is what it comes down to, right? Is how do we educate and elevate the level of consciousness and awareness around us? Because that's the only way that things are going to change or transform. And how do we empower people around us as well to do that, as well as being that ally ourselves? There's a comment that Priti's shared here in the chat. One thing I think could help is focusing on your own journey to discover your true self and reach that place of oneness. You will stop seeing everyone else as separate from you. Inclusiveness will become who you are. But the desire to reach there has to be ignited and motivated to go on this inward journey. As much as educating others is important, truly societal change starts with every individual and makes this conscious choice to go within. I wholeheartedly agree with that.
I think that's a great comment. I won't go down the obvious route, but I think because we talk about spirituality quite a lot, but I'm completely aligned with that comment. Is it who made it? Priti, yeah. So thank you, Priti, for that comment. A beautiful comment, because ultimately, if you get rid of the ism, what are you left with? You're left with the word R-A-C-E, right? Race. Okay. Literally, if you break down what race is, right, it's just somebody, forget the category and the group and the name, it's another human being, right? So it comes back to what General was saying earlier on, and what you just said about elevating your consciousness. Once we become self-aware that we are all one connected consciousness, right? Literally, I mean on a deep level where absolutely you're smiling, the person you hug, it won't change whether they're black, white, pink, alien, whatever color they are, right? It doesn't matter. It matters not, because they're another soul. I think that's a deeper self-awareness. I think if you're in that mindset, and I wish to pray, and I hope that more and more people are, then it matters not. There is no inward and outward projection of what race is and it isn't, right? Because it's all inclusive, it's all one. That's a beautiful place to be, right? Unfortunately, not everyone's has that awareness and insight and intention, but if we were to solve this problem, that would be the way to do it.
So definitely at a deeper level, when we have the conversation of oneness, like, you know, that it's a no-brainer. When you get to that stage, you're all connected. But how does one even want to be willing to choose to even start that work? Or let's say if no one wants to go down that particular rabbit hole, at the very least, how can someone that, going back to what we started, can actually begin to have these conversations, become that ally to call out maybe some of the language and the behavior and the passive aggression or discrimination that we see? So an example, say within our South Asian culture particularly, is people are judged on their level of beauty or their level of intelligence or capability based on the color of their skin. Now, we're still quote unquote brown, but there are levels, right? When you see in, let's say, movies or in India right now or whatever, like the Fair and Lovely adverts, where beauty is associated with the fairness of your skin, and that's been perpetuated for a couple of 100 years. Whereas if you're sort of lower caste, you're more manual labor, you're out in the field, you're much more darker, you're out in the sun. So even within cultures, there's this, you look at someone and think, oh, they're a certain way, we don't mix with them, or they shouldn't marry in with us, or their level of intelligence is being judged as well. So how do we begin to start having these conversations to empower people around us to just recognize people as people?
Keeping it real, having conversations, calling people out in a good way, right? By having conversations with your family, with your friends, and realizing that some friends, somebody told me, I mean, I'm sure we will get lots of comments, but two people reached out to me saying, Manoj, I'm in this situation and maybe my beliefs aren't aligned with somebody, my friends or whatever. They didn't name the individuals. You know, what would you do in this situation? And this is a perfect example. If you had a conversation like this with someone, right, and then you didn't agree with their opinion, let's say their opinion wasn't a general opinion, it was leading towards the subject that we're talking about now, which is race, which could be from one end of the spectrum to hate, right, which is we haven't even touched on yet, right? The dark sort of side of it. Would you really hang around with that person, honestly? Right? And like, just would you? I don't know. Like if you constantly heard that echo chamber of hatred comments, but yet they were their friend or your family member or even closer, right, a partner. I don't know, right? Just try it. You'd be shocked. Would you actually accept it? You wouldn't. You wouldn't. Why? Because it's in your face. Because ignorance is bliss. What happens in the other part of the world, we turn a blind eye. Let's just keep it real, right? Because if it's not on my doorstep, it's not hurting me. I'm not aware of it. I mean, I don't watch news. I haven't watched news for about 12 years or something, right? Call me ignorant or whatever, but it's just negativity. But I'm aware of what's happening in the situation, but I made a choice not to receive funneled, filtered information a long time ago, right? That's just my personal choice. I'm not saying everybody watches news is getting brainwashed, but you guys make your own minds up, right? But conversation, that's the best social experiment you could ever do. What General said, like, have a conversation with your friends and family. It will be mind-boggling. Oh my God, the stuff that you would learn about yourself and about people around you, it'll be an eye-opener.
Yeah. No, honestly, I completely echo that. I mean, just from experience, it's really nerve-wracking at first because you're not used to having those uncomfortable conversations, but uncomfortable conversations are the conversations we really need to have. There's a reason why they're uncomfortable. But then once you do start having those open conversations, it's pretty amazing what can come out of that, and what you learn about, like Manoj was saying, what you learn about yourself, what you've learned about this other person. And I'm not saying all these conversations will go amazingly well. You're not always going to agree on stuff, but it just opens up something. It opens up a whole other kind of subject and topic, and you'll be surprised, like something I'm doing with my parents. it's quite interesting. Anytime they say something that's not appropriate, I will call them out. And it's got to the point now where they actually realize themselves, oh, hang on a second, no, I shouldn't be saying that. And it's not just about I shouldn't be saying that and that's it. Because we've had these conversations, they actually understand why it's important not to say that. I was so shocked. And these are people who are in their 60s, 70s, who've had this certain belief ever since they've grown up, but they're being open to listen to me. And that's only because I'm trying to be open to listen to their side of the story as well.
Yeah.
It's really, really fascinating, really fascinating.
And I think this is the real fuel of this conversation, is you can't be judgmental to those that you're trying to challenge or call out or understand, right? Because otherwise, what's the difference between you and them?
Exactly.
It's a hard line to tell, because something is being said that is inflammatory or discriminatory in nature, but as Manoj just said, you have to meet the person where they're at for them to want to level with you as well. And an uncomfortable conversation is one where you grow in, right? So it's being willing to recognize that the other person in front of you just has an opinion, and that opinion comes from somewhere. They're not a bad person for having that opinion. It may impact other people in a certain way, but if you box anyone into a corner, they'll come out fighting. So it's having that conversation, really, I suppose, coming from a place of love and acceptance, either way of how it goes. And I think that's where a lot of doors will open for a lot of people.
And also, what's our own individual lived experiences, and respect everyone's story. Like I can't. Oh my God! I just remembered like this memory, right? So I was born in, I'm 46. I was born in 75. I went to, John Kelly Boys High School, all boys school. I was 11-year-old in my first year of high school, right? I remember in my third year, National Front coming down. Literally, National Front, right? Coming. I'm like, what the hell is National Front? I don't know what that is, right? Bunch of skinheads, right? Same haircut as me, right? So we're like, now retrospectively, right? So, and it's like, it was scary. It was a scary time, but it was one of those things where it was ingrained in that early age, thinking, wow, okay, they're just coming to pick a fight because you're not the same color as them, and either you fight or you get beaten up. It was like a simple kind of binary decision, right? And it was probably worse for our own generations. So generally, you talked about something really interesting, and I was meditating on that, is that the courage that the older generation, and then fair play to them and your family, if that is your family you're referencing, that they're open to having these conversations just to meet you halfway to understand your viewpoint, and you're open to having these conversations with them, because it's not them, it's their generation before them that it's probably instilled in them, right? And somebody has to break that cycle.
And that's exactly what came out of the conversations with my grandparents. I mean, they still are, they still don't really understand everything, but they're open to listening to me. And that's exactly what came out when I was trying to understand, why is it you feel this certain way or think this certain way about a particular group? And they said exactly the same thing. It's what they've been taught by their parents, and their parents have been taught that by their parents. So it's like it goes for centuries,
But somebody has to stand up and break that cycle. And the way you break that cycle in the most ethical, purest way is have a conversation. Be brave enough to, at least, you don't need to be a visionary or a game changer or trying to create a movement, but just have a conversation in a really subtle way, saying, oh, this happened on TV. What do you think? What do you think? Not impress upon themselves on your opinion. I guarantee you it will elicit it will be the best. Forget Big Brother rubbish, what people watch, right? Whatever reality, sorry, I'm going to bash reality TV, right? But that will be the best reality TV. You'll be in that moment and you'll learn so much about yourself, and you learn so much about people who you care about deeply. And if you deeply do care about those people, I challenge you to have those conversations in a subtle way, whether it's children, whether it's your partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, brother, sister, sibling, mom, dad, whatever. I remember when I was younger, oh my God, all these memories are coming back now, right? I brought my friend Stephen, right, back home. I'm going to really show my age now, where we had a Commodore 6. Got any geeks out there know what Commodore 64 is? Like, put it on the comment, right? We where the cassette tapes, we had to load the games, right? I'm talking way back, right? Anyway, I'll stop talking now. I sound like Uncle Albert. But where I brought Stephen back just to play a computer game. I didn't tell my parents because I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. And the look my mum gave me, oh my God, it's like I committed a crime. And then I could just feel the scolding coming on, right? And my mum's a really lovely person, so she never shouted or screamed at me, anything like that. But she goes, I'll translate. She said in Gujarati, she goes, why did you bring that person home? I'm like, what do you mean that person? You mean my friend Stephen? She goes, yeah. And he goes, yeah, but he's black. I'm like, I know he's black. I can see he's black. And mom was like, yeah, but that's where my jewelry is. I'm like, oh my God, such a stereotype, right? Of like how you said, right? The word surname Amin being just under the category of a Muslim name and an Indian name, but somebody branding everybody as Muslims as bad. Obviously, that's just a fallacy. There's bad people, there's never bad religions. Let's just get that clear, right? Because that really drives me mental when people say this religion, that. There's no such thing as a bad, there's bad individuals and groups in every race, every culture, and every background. So it's just fascinating, like how all these things are coming back, and it makes me smile now because I would never let that creep into my mind, right? Not a single thought. And my kids growing up now, I'm having a self-reflective moment here that I don't do enough to talk about them about this subject. So I'm going to start talking about them, whether I use football as a medium, as an entry point, because they both love football, whatever it is, right? But I'll be fascinated to know what actually happens in school and the conversations that actually are happening, because that's where it starts from, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you saying that, it's just reminding me of something that I laugh at this, but I remember having a conversation with someone after this as well. It's cringe as I'm going to say this, but just go with it. So I remember, I think I must have been about 5 years old. Me and my dad, his friend, and his kids, we just kind of went for a drive. They went to like a pawn shop to get some stuff for us. So me and the two other kids were sitting in the back.
Translate Ban for a non-Indian
Pawn
audience.
is like these were good stuff. You can get the sweet ones, they're the good ones.
Indian
Indian
delicacy that usually gets served at weddings. There you go. Look it up.
The cherry inside it, it's good stuff. So yeah, so they went into the shop. I think we're on Green Street as well. So I'm sitting in the car back seat with two other kids, and they were saying to me, look, you know, when we tell you to duck, duck. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, no, we're saying this for your protection. It's like, because we're all by ourselves. And I was like, all right. So a guy walks past and they're like, okay, duck, hide. And I was like, okay, cool. So I just did that. And I was like, what was that all about? And they said, don't worry, we're keeping you safe. It's like, what's going on? So anyway, this happened 3 or 4 times. And then I was just like, I thought, this is really, really silly. Like, why am I doing this? My back was hurting. And they were like, when you see a black person, you should hide because they'll try and kill you. And I was like, what? Like, so I mean, at the time I went along with it, and I reflected back and I addressed this with these people because we're now grown up, and I was like, what was all that about? Because like that was weird, and looking back, it was quite, you know, I feel quite ashamed. And what I got to understand was actually their grandparents fled East Africa when Idi Amin was there, so that was their grandparents' experience of trying to save themselves, which was passed down to their children and their children's children. So I was like, but we're in London, like we're on Green Street, like this isn't. But you can see how past narratives frame future generations as well. And when I had this conversation with those lads, they were like, they didn't even realize, and that had happened until I brought it up. And it was like, you know, it's mad when you think that stereotypes and that kind of fits into the narrative as well.
And that and the intention was pure, probably, because nobody can relate to that unless you've been bled in a war-torn country by a dictatorship, right? You know, Idi Amin, right? So none of us can begin to kind of know what that probably feels like. I mean, this age group right now, right?
Yeah.
Or us three anyway, we're talking about. I don't know what age group the listeners are, but the fact that they had that conversation, or you had it with them now, and they realized their unconscious bias right,
Mm.
that they had back then unknowingly, because it was imprinted in them,
Mhm.
is pretty powerful, right? And I think if we can break that and unravel that and unpack that, then we're part of the solution, surely, by having those conversations and having the little bit of courage and, to have those conversations. And it's not like I can't remember who said it, but you said it, or John said it, it's coming from a place of righteousness, because that's ego. Let's park the ego. It's literally coming from a place of humble humility, of having self-awareness, and coming from a place of love, that because they're around you, so that means that there must be somebody that you deeply care about, right? That's in your circle or family or friendship or whatever, partner, whatever. And then because you care about them, you want to understand where they're coming from, and you want to understand your perception of their perception, what made you have the conversation in the first place, and also jointly unpack and learn together what your thought patterns are, and how did you come to this assumption, right? Because everything is an assumption. We've talked deep in one of our other talks about belief systems, but we won't go there. But it's just fascinating how much stuff comes out right from our childhood. It's just absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, and the thing is, this was such a healthy conversation to have, because it was like, looking back on it, it's like, yeah, I don't want to use the word wrong, but that wasn't cool what we were doing, because what was the impact on that person that walked past, and we clearly saw them and we were hiding from them? Like, what were they left with, and how is that, what's been the ripple effect of those 4 or 5 individuals that walked past that clearly saw what we were doing?
Because you can reinforce a stereotype on a person by giving them a label that they actually don't even belong to that label unknowingly, but then become that label, right? That's the dangerous thing as well. It's like giving somebody a name or tag, and they have no apparent awareness of what they're doing, or whether they belong to that name or tag unknowingly or knowingly, is a really, really dangerous thing to do, right? So that person, there's a ripple effect of that action on that person or persons. They probably thought you guys were bonkers anyway, right? But like, why are you ducking every time, right?
Between 5 and 8 years old, like trying to hide in the back of a car, you can't hide. You just fold yourself, right? But when you look back, it's kind of embarrassing. But I mean, it was what it was back then. But it just, again, unconscious bias shows up in those ways, right? Where it's subtleties like crossing the road when you see someone with a certain appearance, or like letting them walk past before you walk the other way. It's these little things that I'd urge everyone to start noticing, and just start questioning, where does that come from, and how much of that is even yours?
I guess there's a fine line. Look, there's a fine line between having an awareness around your security and your welfare, because if there's a group of, let's say, it matters not, right, what color, it literally matters. Let's say a group of 8 guys, let's say it's me and Viraj and 6 other guys
I don't think we're that intimidated.
in hoodies, right? In hoodies, right? And there's a female walking past, right? That's kind of, and it's 11 o'clock in the night. That's kind of different, right? That if that female makes a personal choice for her safety, and by the way, I'm not saying it in a sexist way. It could be 8 females in hoodies and the male, right, thinking, hang on a minute, I'm outnumbered here. I don't trust, they look a little bit dodgy. That's self-awareness and self-preservation. That's different, right?
No,
But then,
it's your these micro.
yeah, the microisms of racial behavior could be really easy to pick up on, because it's how people look at you in a train. It's how people move away from you, or how step towards you, or whatever, right? They're there. Signals and signs are all there. It's just our level of awareness, right? Or ignorance, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, as we wrap up, I mean, there's so many ways we could take this conversation, but General, what would you say the biggest takeaways for anyone watching right now and has been impacted by things that we've seen, not just with the England football team, but across Southeast Asia, just everywhere. Like anyone and everyone has to a level has had an impact of a level of racism. Like, what would you say from being an ally is 1 or 2 key things that they can do?
Oh, I think I would just say you know, if you've, I think like what we're basically just doing, what we've just done now, conversations are just so, so key, whether you are the person who's faced racism, whether you're trying to call out people who are being racist. I just think start with those conversations. You know, do start calling people out and have those uncomfortable kind of conversation. It's such an empowering thing to do, because you don't know, like we've just said in these conversations, you know, we've had discussions with people before who've sort of unintentionally been racist, but once you do call these people out, it's amazing what you end up talking about. And I'm not saying it changes them as a person, but they do kind of go away with something. They learn something from that conversation, and it just gives them something to think about before the next time they might feel a certain way or think a certain way. So it's literally just talking about how you're feeling and calling people out. Honestly, I think it's so, so key in any situation like this.
And just to add to that, I think you're spot on. Like, calling out doesn't need to be a confrontation. It could be,
No, absolutely not.
you know, what was that about? Like, what are your thoughts? You know, it can
Yeah.
be, yeah, it's very refreshing to have those types of conversations. Manoj, how about yourself?
I challenge everyone to do what Janel said, but before you do that, actually go stare at the mirror in your house and look at yourself. Ask yourself the question: are you subjective to unconscious or conscious racist comments, behavior, footprints in your life? Like we've just given some examples, and ask yourself that strong question, but are you a racist? And it might be difficult to ask yourself that because you can't lie to yourself, right? You're looking yourself in the mirror and you might not know you're racist. So I'm not saying it from a negative or positive connotation. I'm just saying it from an awareness perspective, because before you have a conversation with others, have a conversation with yourself and deeply meditate on that. That is your behavior, your belief system, your choice, your assumptions, yours, or are they others that have been instilled in you? And if there are others that have been instilled in you, it's okay if you agree with them. And if you don't agree with them, make a choice to change it, and then have that conversation with others, because then you're meeting them at the same place.
Yeah, I agree with all the above, and I think it's important to think that this conversation, it's there's no quick fix to it. It's going to be a long-term thing. There will always be a level of divisiveness in societies and culture, because I guess that's just the nature of us as human beings, as species, right? We're tribal, communal animals in that sense. But having said that, we also have something in between here, which is a mind, and something in here is a heart. And when we meet people with that level of intellect and compassion, all barriers drop.
Yeah, definitely. Is there any questions from anyone? Just curious, because I never look at the Facebook.
Yeah,
really
no, I was just going through the comments now. So Shami was saying earlier, she gave an example of inclusion and diversity, meaning echoing what Janel said. Let's try to understand what people go through, and if it touches someone, then that's where change begins, right? Absolutely. Seeking to understand and be understood is one of the 7 habits, which is very, very crucial as well. No, I can't see any other comments here. I see there's 4 or 5 people live right now, and obviously the replay will always be available. So I think we're definitely going to circle in. We went a little over, but I think we touched on some awesome ground. So Janel, Manoj, thank you guys so much for creating this conversation. And
thank you. And I think big shout out to Reroute and our sister group for women out there who want to have a conversation, with like-minded females 18 to 35. And then big shout out to Mental Wealth, other sister group. And then if you're a guy, I got a call during work from someone. I obviously won't name them on Facebook Live, but he said, Manoj, my wife said I need to speak to you. And I'm like, I hope it's for the right reasons. And I'm glad he mentioned Mindful Men's Club. And my CEO opposite me was like, what was that about? I'm like, it's about, the stuff I do for mental health, but I always talk about it at work, right? So I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I WhatsApped him. But I think it was a humble reminder that just have a conversation, just keep it real, be authentic, don't fake it, take off that mask, that veil, no pun intended. I'm not talking about COVID, I'm talking about your real mask that you wear on your face every single day, whether you choose to accept it or not. I challenge everyone. Most people wear masks. The second you go through that liberation of journey of sharing your story, understanding your story, however you want to do it, it's just so liberating. When you do that, you don't wear a mask anymore in life. It's like people like you or they hate you. It's like you just easy come, easy go, right? And I can say that with conviction because I know Chinel's been through that. I know Viraj has been through it, and I've been through that. So you are who you are. Be the best version of yourself, and then just try to help people around you. That's it, right? That's how you could be an ally.
Perfect. Awesome note to end on, guys. Thank you so much. And yeah, if anyone else watching right now, we've got our next Mindful Men's Club session in a couple of days on Saturday, 11 o'clock on letting go, which is going to be another solid
Ooh,
session in itself.
that's a good topic.
Yeah, so join us for the Zoom.
It's a great topic, and there's a female guest coach who's coming on who specializes in deep meditation about letting go. So yeah, definitely tune in to watch that. And if you're watching this, hashtag replay, and then put your questions in there, and we promise to go through each and every one and answer your questions or comments and share your learnings. Have a blessed evening, everyone.
Good night, guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.